All right, so now we're going to welcome Amanda Larson uh, to teach us about open pedagogy. Thanks, Amanda.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm going to go ahead and pop the Mentimeter link into the chat. So if you want to get set up there in advance, that would be awesome. Or you can do it when we get to that slide. That's also fine. So today I'm here to talk to you about open pedagogy, which is my favorite topic to talk about. Um, I'm Amanda Larson, and I spend a lot of time helping folks think about open pedagogy. I'm really lucky this semester that I'm working with instructors on three different courses that range from undergraduate students to graduate students with open pedagogy experiences. Um, and let's dive in. So we're going to get set up in Mentimeter. You can use the link that I put in the chat, or you can navigate to menti.com and use code 36399177. And I will let folks do that. If you could hit that little thumbs up button once you're in there, that'd be great. Gives me an idea of how many people are inside the Mentimeter. Oh, I got to see some thumbs up. Okay, so let's move on. So, in the spirit of open pedagogy, we're going to do some scaffolding. So, we're going to use Mentimeter throughout this presentation. And so, we have to have sort of like a get ready question. And so, we're going to start with how are you feeling today? Are you sleepy, energized, mellow, frazzled, fabulous? I am a little frazzled today. I was almost in a car accident. And so, I'm just like trying to chill down from that.
No.
All right, lots of frazzled and lots of fabulous. I like that split. Okay, so here's the agenda. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what is open pedagogy. So we're going to look through some community definitions of open pedagogy and pedagogical practices. Then we're going to talk about like what does open pedagogy even do, guys? How is it different? Then we're going to talk about how you can do open pedagogy. So, how do we do it? And that's going to build off of universal design for learning, scaffolding, and this idea of cultivating brave spaces. And then I'm going to share some examples, tips, and resources, as well as some links that you can check out later if you want to do a deep dive into any of this. So, what is open pedagogy? We're going to start with how familiar are you? Have you heard of it before? Or are you like this kitty and you're like, what's open pedagogy? I don't know. Um, do you know what it is? Could you define it? This is a great tone setting. It's going to let me know where your familiarity lies so that we can have a better conversation. That's a good split. So we have some folks who are just learning about open pedagogy, and that is super exciting. So if you know what open pedagogy is, how would you define it? If you don't know what open pedagogy is, how do you what do you imagine it is? There are no wrong answers. I'll give y'all a second to type in some responses. Inclusive teaching through materials and approach, pedagogical practices that engage students in content creation. I think open pedagogy is teaching in a way that is accessible to all, teaching with open access resources, the development of teaching practices and learning objects that are available to share and reuse through CC licenses that involve learners. These are fantastic. Oh, we got one more. The opposite of assignments that you do and grade and throw away and forget. Yeah, awesome. So that's actually a pretty good encompassment of some of the definitions that we're going to talk about. Oh, I like this one too. Pedagogical practices that provide opportunities for students to get involved in the teaching and learning process. We're going to talk about that. So open pedagogy starts back in 2013. I mean, really, if we want to get serious, it starts like in the 1970s with Paul Freire. Um, or we could also look at like Black African pedagogists for where these practices come from. But Wiley said that it's a set of teaching and learning practices only possible in the context of free access and the 4R permissions. And then in 2017, he decided to add a fifth R And so he had to update his definition to include that fifth R. And so in 2017, they also take place when you have permission to engage in the 5R activities. So what are the 5R activities? Um, this is a lovely example of what student OER can look like. So students developed this infographic about the 5Rs, and those Rs are reuse. So you have the ability to reuse this resource in a variety of ways. You can remix it. So you can take this thing and that thing and smush them together however you want, provided their licenses match appropriately. You can redistribute. So you have the ability to share the work. You can revise it. So that means that you can adapt and modify it, localize it to your particular context, and you can retain it. You get to own, make, and control your copies of the content. And those are enabled by open licenses. So Catherine Cronin says that it's the use, reuse, creation of OER and collaborative pedagogical practices that employ social and participatory technologies for interaction, peer learning, knowledge creating, and sharing, and also the empowerment of learners. Robin DeRosa, oh, I spelled her last name wrong. Shame on me. And Rajiv Jangiani say it's an access-oriented commitment to learner-driven education and is a process of designing architectures and using tools for learning that enable students to shape the public knowledge commons. So thinking about the community of learners as well as the public as learners. They also say that they might insist upon the centrality of those 5Rs to this work. As a librarian, I have to mention information literacy. So the real benefit of open resources comes not from the free textbooks, but from the freedom of students to be involved in the development, curation, and maintenance of open resources skills. And those activities often exercise information literacy skills. My favorite definition out of all of these is the one that says, hey, guess what? There are a lot of definitions, and we're going to try and combine them the best we can. So Casey and all write that open pedagogy is a set of teaching practices that are built on the foundation of the open education community's shared values, which is including, but not limited to, student agency, sharing, diversity inclusion, peer learning, renewal assignments, co-creation, collaboration, and then also active and experiential learning. And then Jasmine Robert Cruz, who is a colleague of mine at Ohio State, says that open pedagogy was born out of an open education movement that argues that education should be affordable, inclusive, equitable, and relevant to learners, and asks whose knowledge is considered valuable. So students' knowledge considered valuable? I think it is. Who's centered in education systems, and why do curricula center certain histories? The other angle of this from Rajiv again is that there are 5 Rs for open pedagogy. So while we have those for OER, we also have those for open pedagogy. And so those are respect. So we're thinking about students as creators, the invisible labor that goes into creating these things, reciprocation, so sharing back to the community, being good citizens, risk, acknowledging that the risks are substantially higher for scholarly voices that are marginalized by the academy. Reach, impact beyond the classroom, course, or semester that gets at that disposable bit. And then resistance. It's forces that pit students versus instructors, capitalism, surveillance. And so we're going to resist those by engaging students as content creators. So that was a whirlwind of definitions. But what relevant themes stand out to you from those definitions of open pedagogy? Risk and resistance, reciprocate, engage students, co-creators, relevant, student agency. These are all fantastic. I love watching these word clouds come together. They're different in every single version of this presentation I do. Okay, that's fantastic. Student engagement, inclusive, resist again, power sharing, that's a good one. Student agency. All right. So what does open pedagogy do? So it has some characteristics, and I've been doing this work for almost 9 years now. And these are sort of like what I have coalesced down to sort of like the characteristics of open pedagogy from the experience of doing this work over that amount of time. So it leverages the open nature of OER to facilitate learning, whether that is bringing in OER resources, open educational resources to be a free textbook in the classroom, to teaching students how to find OER for the assignments that they're co-creating. It just levers open licensing, but that also means that there's a component, a scaffolding component, where we're teaching about open. What is open? Why does it matter to students? Um, it emphasizes community and collaboration, sharing resources, idea, and power. It really breaks down sort of like the sage on the stage model and brings us into a space of sort of like circular power where we're all on the same level with some guidance from an instructor to help us get through the end of the project. It trades out disposable assignments for renewable ones. It connects students to the wider public as knowledge creators. We see that a lot in sort of Wikipedia exercises, in website creation, things where people in the wider public can come and visit a resource. It centers learner agency and consent. And this gets at both the fact that students own their intellectual property most often, unless they're working under the direction of somebody who's paying them at the university. But also FERPA, we have to consider the privacy guidelines that students operate within the university. And so we can't tell them you have to license under this specific license. They get to pick. They get to pick whether their work is public or hidden. And we have to provide those options as educators for them. It centers care and compassion in the classroom. Doing this kind of work can be kind of scary. Most students don't know that they have intellectual property, don't know what working in the open means, and might rightfully have some hesitancy about sharing their work openly in a way they've never done before. So we want to make sure that we tackle that with compassion. And then offer an opportunity to create additional DEI inflection points in the classroom. So thinking about how students can bring their lived experience to the materials they're creating and thus represent themselves within the work that will continue on after them. And then we want to also make sure that it provides lots of scaffolding throughout, both for tools and assignments, but also that intellectual property piece, the licensing piece of that. So how do we do it? How do we do open pedagogy? We're going to start small because we can't do everything in one night. Lots of instructors that I work with want to create a whole new textbook with their students in a semester. That's not always the best place to start, particularly if you don't have the capacity as an instructor to sort of build in the scaffolding that needs to happen for students for that to happen. Embrace renewable assignments, perhaps one at a time. So maybe you work on swapping out one assignment a semester for something that would be open pedagogy. Intentionally scaffolding assignments and tools. So making sure that students know why they're doing a thing, what the tool is, why did you pick that tool? Are they picking the tool? Is that where the choice is coming from? And then making sure there are check-in points throughout the way, throughout the process of the assignment to make sure that everybody has the information they need to be successful. That's building in checkpoints and communicating transparently. I also think it's really important to let your students know why you chose to have them do this. A lot of the instructors I work are concerned about like students being, oh, you're asking me to do your job. No, not really. I'm asking you to create knowledge. And then we're going to decide how to package it inside the confines of this class. And then collaborate with students, librarians, instructional designers, or other instructors as needed to help lift the load of this work. So disposable assignments. Some instructors don't like to hear assignments called disposable, but I think that we can all think of at least one assignment that is pretty disposable. For me, it's discussion boards, because the students get on there and they're like, hey, Becky, you are the smartest person ever. Good job. I agree with everything you said. I'm not adding anything too new to this conversation. You are just the smartest and the best. And that's not useful. That does not have pedagogical value other than saying, oh, you did the thing. Let's check it off for participation. And so there are other ways that we could do that. There's social annotation where they could annotate a text together. So if you were using the discussion board to talk about reading, that's a great way to do that. Seraphin and I'll explain that after a student spends hours of cognitive effort, A teacher may spend minutes grading an assignment that is eventually discarded. And this loss, which otherwise would be utilized outside the student-teacher dyad, has been estimated to exceed 2 billion hours of student work per semester. And so that's a lot of work that ends up in the trash. If we want to think about like our metaphorical recycle bins was the trash. It also is transactional in nature. The student is turning in something just to get the points. Sometimes that's all they've done is calculated, I need X many points, so I'm going to do this many assignments to get those many points. They're confined to the student-teacher dyad, which means that they only exist in a place where the student and teacher are looking at the thing, and that's a closed feedback loop. So unless you're providing robust feedback on those assignments, they aren't necessarily helpful in a feedback loop. So some examples, you'll see the discussion board is the first one. Deliverables that get pitched after class. My favorite example when I give this talk is Heather Smisilli's Core 101. It's science for non-majors. And the way she taught this, they used to make a big printed poster, and then she would go outside after class and find all of their science posters in the trash can. They were literally in the garbage. And so she thought to herself, there has to be a better way to do this where the work doesn't just die after they put all this effort into it. And so she doesn't have to get depressed when she goes and see their printed posters in the trash afterwards. So what she did is she had them in groups create websites on science topics. And then the next cohort of students would embellish and grow those websites. And they could also pitch to make a new topic if they wanted to, a new science topic. So in the course of her course, like an example of something that got pitched was an AI, artificial intelligence, got added as one of the websites. Reflections without connections to course materials or that lack transparency for why they matter. Um, I am the student who's like, you don't care what I think. I don't care what I think. I am just writing this reflection because you told me I had to. And so I understand where students are like, this reflection is busy work. But if you tell me why I'm doing that, if you give me prompting questions, that changes it. Essays that only the student will ever see. So that these aren't scaffolded writing assignments that happen throughout the semester. They aren't assignments where you built in peer review. It's one of those things where like the student creates the paper in a vacuum and then the instructor reads the paper inside the vacuum and it gets a grade. Creating media learning objects, so images, voice threads, videos that only teachers see. A lot of those things could be reusable. And then assignments that feel like or are busy work. Um, and I think discussion boards fall into that when they are not scaffolded well. So renewable assignments, what are those? Renewable assignments provide students with opportunities to engage in meaningful work. So they're adding value to the world. They're providing a foundation for future students to learn upon and build upon. And they're possible because of the ability to engage in 5R activities. So we're using open licensing in this context to make them shareable, to tell the end user what they can do with the assignment when they're done. And they're an alternative to traditional disposal assignments, which students throw away after they're graded. So what are some examples? So I shared one earlier of social annotation of a shared reading. They could also create anthology excerpts for if it's like a literature class. They could contribute to the creation of an open textbook. They can write quiz questions. I have a fuller example about that we'll talk about in a minute. Creating tutorials, course guides, LibGuides, or other public learning objects that they share with their students or the public. Creating a topic website, editing Wikipedia entries. Wikipedia in particular needs a lot of extra scaffolding because that is a very scary territory to be like doing edits in with the sort of like hierarchy of how things get approved there. And so you want to be sure that that's well scaffolded. Creating lists of common problems or advice for writing after doing peer review of other students' work and then self-reflecting on their own work. So you don't have to do this alone. My pal Stacy Katz and Jennifer Van Ellen created a renewable assignment design framework that will walk you through starting with your current assignment, considering what meaningful OER contributions there could be, selecting tools or repositories to use for that, and then designing intentional negotiations for openness, which is that consent part, thinking about how students want to publish their work. Do they want it to be publicly viewable? Do they want it to be hidden inside of the learning management system? Um, and then finalizing and reclassifying the assignment now as a renewable assignment. They have a lovely chapter that is linked here that will walk you through that in much more detail than I can in the space of this presentation. Types of assignments you might consider. So there's textbook creation, collaborative annotation. When I was a teaching assistant at UW-Madison, I worked in this field. I was helping people make OER, and one of the open pedagogy projects we had, students created object stories for museum catalog in Mount Horeb, Wisconsin. They can create videos, websites, edit Wikipedia articles, research guides, case studies, images, zines. Blogging is popular sometimes inside of the open pedagogy space. Collaborative anthologies. They can curate open access articles. They can build question banks and worksheets to help practice and study knowledge content. But it can't happen without scaffolding. And I could talk to you for scaffolding for like another 3 hours. So I'm going to try and rein myself in. But it's really important to scaffold conceptual frameworks. So thinking about what do you want them to learn in the assignment? What are the concept frameworks there? Copyright, open licensing, intellectual property. I have an assignment where I have them actually go read their IP policy so they can see how confusing it is, but also that they have rights and these are what they look like. And we do that as a social annotation assignment. So they can ask questions, they can tell me what's confusing. The technology to complete the open pedagogy project. So some examples of this are Pressbooks. Manifold is another publishing platform similar to Pressbooks. H5P are interactive HTML5 like learning objects. And then Hypothesis is a social annotation tool. But you want to make sure you scaffold them into it. So how do these tools work? Why are we using them? How do you get your account started? Are all great places to start with technology. So the other thing that I like to think about is that you have broken it down into consistent sections that makes it transparent to students what they're doing and why they are doing. We are using Pressbooks because it's the industry standard for open educational resource publishing. We are using Hypothesis because it's a great social annotation tool that will allow you to engage with your peers. Um, and then what are you doing? You are creating annotations. Here's what an annotation is, because you can't count that they will know what an annotation is. Explicit language about students feeling comfortable creating works that might be public. So having a syllabus statement that says, as a class, we're going to discuss how public or private facing these creations will be. I want to make sure you all feel comfortable engaging with the assignment. Support included for where students can get help for the project, including making their work accessible. So what can this look like in practice? So I do a lot of work in Pressbooks with instructors who want to create textbooks with their students. So we start with expectation setting. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? There's a training session for them on what does working in the opening mean? What is Creative Commons? Then there's tool training. So how do we use Pressbooks? And I usually go in and I give that training. And we make sure everybody can get logged in during that session because that's the big hurdle is making sure everybody has accounts and that they can log into the tool. And then we let them go away and do the work. But then we have explicit check-ins. So how is the work going? Where do they need support? Do they need to contact me because they're having Pressbook issues? Do they need to talk to their instructor about the content or the topic that they picked? And then they do some more work, and then the final projects get turned in. And with that, we get assigned student authoring agreement, and they pick what license they're going to use and whether they want their work to be hidden or public. And then I go through and I check the licenses and publish a final version of that project. But there's lots of scaffolding throughout in all of those different spots. So the other part of this is agency. So letting them feel like they can make choices about what they're going to do in the class. So it could be the assignment format. So what do they turn the assignment in as? Are they making a podcast, a video, a blog, a textbook? Are they doing an infographic? So that's one place you can let them make choices in the format of what they're doing. Topic selection, this is very popular. This allows them to connect make special connections to things that they're interested in context of the course, which then makes the course more relevant to them because they can connect it to that special interest. And then deciding if they will openly license their work or share it publicly is the last choice to think about. So I say that open pedagogy can't happen authentically in the classroom without giving students the agency to opt out or enthusiastically consent to share their work. For me, this is like that's the first yes, no for whether open pedagogy is happening. Are students making a choice about how their work is being used? Um, and it's important to really give them time to change their mind about if and how they want to share their work. So we have them sort of like select a license that they're thinking about in the beginning of the semester, and then they finalize it in that open licensing quiz. So they have time to decide how they want their work to be used. And they do typically own their IP unless they are doing work for hire. So working in the open can be scary. So we talk a lot about building brave spaces, and this takes away the idea of safe space and replaces it with brave space. So some students will take the idea that I feel very uncomfortable about working in the open. Therefore, this isn't a safe space because safe spaces mean I should be comfy. Where instead, pitching it as a brave space allows them to embrace the idea that learning is uncomfortable and that they can still do things that are uncomfortable in sort of an education setting. Um, and we do that through talking about hard topics, working in the open, maybe getting a code of conduct for the classroom that they build together. How do they want to talk to each other? Particularly if they're doing group work, that's really helpful to help them manage their relationships. And just letting them know that it's okay to be uncomfortable, that we are being brave together in this process. If you want to learn more about brave spaces, I have put that information here. These are both fantastic articles. Your library can probably get them for you. Um, so my question is that was a lot of information. That was a heck of a lot of information. Are you doing some of these things? And your options are yes, I think so, not yet. Hmm. But we've got another good spread. Fantastic. Okay. So if you are, what methods are you using in your course? Share with the class. If not, if you're in that middle one where you're like, I think I might be doing it, what would you like to incorporate? Social annotation with Cami. Ooh, lots of annotation. That's exciting. Social annotation with perusal. I haven't heard of Cami. I'll have to look into that one. Mhm. Building the website was neat. Research guides is another idea, like the idea of bringing learners into. And I think that's one of the things that's really reproducible. So you can have an assignment where your students help you find research guide information every semester. And that keeps it fresh with the pace that research happens in and is published in, particularly for industries that need case studies all the time. That's super helpful. In the spirit of time, I'm going to move forward. So let's talk about some examples, tips, and resources. So Rajiv Jingiyani was a psychology professor for a very long time. He is now an administrator at Brock University in Canada. But what his open pedagogy project was teaching students how to write questions. So they built a question bank together, and there were 1,400 questions that were authored by 35 students over 10 weeks. So students learned all about how to write questions over the course of with the class, and that grew with complexity. So they started with, here's a basic question. Here's how you add distractors. Here's the psychology behind distractors. Um, and they ended up writing multiple choice questions instead as an alternate. So they would have a quiz one week and then they would have question writing the next week. Um, and so they learned a lot about the subject content that they were writing questions for, but also they learned a really transferable skill of writing questions that's very useful. Particularly were they to go on to like graduate study where you have to write discussion questions all the time for your courses. Um, Very, very interesting and fun assignment, that one. Science websites, I talked about this one. Um, and it was the Core 101 Open Pedagogy project. And in the first offering, the students made the websites, and then other offerings, they updated the websites. I might need to go in and update these links now that Heather Massili is not at that institution anymore. There's also a great book called Open Pedagogy Approaches, Faculty, Library, and Student Collaborations. So this is an open textbook, open educational resource. It's a series of case studies that were pulled together around textbook replacement projects, student projects, and open pedagogical design projects. And that's where you will find that renewable assignment framework. Um, so here's an example for math and computer science. So they wrote a book and it is full of shareable and renewable resources for math and computer science courses in which student instructors practice student-centered pedagogy. So this is a bunch of example assignments that you could use if you are in math or computer science. And it talks a little bit about active learning, which lies at the heart of open pedagogy practices. It looks at their process of creating a group active learning prompt, and then lots of course specific activity prompts and worked examples that instructors can directly use or modify. Other examples are the Open Pedagogy portal. This is maintained by the Open Education Network, and they continue running the Learning Circle curriculum that I created for them. And as an outcome of that curriculum, the people who participate are responsible for either, if they're instructors, creating a renewable assignment that they share, or if they are in a librarian or instructional design position, they create a learning object that they would use to teach people about open pedagogy. And the goal of that curriculum and the Learning Circle experience is for those people to experience what open pedagogy feels like so they can build empathy for their students. They'll have had experience in an open pedagogy environment and have a little better idea of how to do all of those things. Um, there are OER enabled pedagogy examples. I linked Open Pedagogy Approaches again there, just in case people missed it on its example slide. And then there's also a guide to making open textbooks with students, which provides a lot of great information about how to scaffold a project with students, what kind of things you need to think about if you're creating open textbooks with students. And I just love it as a resource. So how are you feeling after today's session? Are you excited, confused, ready to go, overwhelmed? If there's something else that you feel conviction about sharing, you can do that in the chat. It is fair to be overwhelmed. This was a whirlwind of information, and we're going to have a good amount of time for questions, I think. Yay, lots of people who are ready to go or excited. So, what excites you about the topics that we covered today? What do you find interesting? I think this one is a word cloud. Yay, it is. Student engagement, collaborative, student-centered learning, renewable assignments. Collaborative is getting really big. That's exciting. New ideas, ways to engage students, autonomy, engagement, helping students. This is extreme. This is like an extremely student-centered kind of pedagogy. So it makes my heart happy to see all of those student options in there. What's one thing that you're going to take away from today's session? Again, no wrong answers. I'll seek out more OER. That's always exciting. Deep diving into the fabulous open pedagogy work already being done. Excited about new tools to look through. Slides and recording so we can share the information. Yeah, please. I'm going to look up the renewable assignment design framework. Cool. I like the idea of having them write questions, also sharing the why with them. No more disposable assignments. I think that makes everybody's heart happy. All right. I budgeted my time accurately. We have plenty of time for questions. If you have questions and you need help, I should let you know that Jen is available for you. And you can reach the folks here at OpenEd help at tamu.edu.
Thanks for the plug. I am fairly proficient with open pedagogy. I have been involved in a couple of open pedagogy projects at my previous university. We flipped an entire master's program to completely open education Z degree, but it involved a lot of open pedagogy in replacement for the disposable assignments. We also were working with chemistry to build a Faces of Chemistry where students were writing bios for marginalized chemists, women, people of color, and it was going to be accessible to and used in K-12. So students were writing those bios and other students would build on those bios. And we also did a collaboration between a professor and her students in the vein of Robin DeRosa's Open Anthology of Earlier American Literature, and they did an Open Victorian Literature book. So I am happy to help anybody on campus who wants to explore open pedagogy. Um, so yeah, um, please reach out and ask. And if I don't know, I know who to go to ask.
I'm very available.
Yeah.
Take a second, marinate, and ask questions. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I apologize to those in the room who are not rookies, but I'm my first year in librarianship, and I do a lot of PD type of stuff. And I, first of all, every single OSU related workshop I've ever been to is just always like, I was the overwhelmed one, right? Because, but it's fabulous overwhelmed. So I think that my question is, I'm very privileged to have been working close by Jennifer and her fabulous team. But where do you think is a great place? Like you listed a lot of resources. What's a good place to start for someone who's just getting in front of class? And we do one shots. So while I like a lot of the different ideas, some of them sound like they would take quite a bit of time. So I'm thinking, what would be, if you had a suggestion off the top, a good place to start for an instruction librarian to read about open ed or pedagogy or to like
Yeah,
those processes?
absolutely. So I didn't link it in here, but let me pull up a link really quick for the curriculum um, that I designed for, and I'll make a note to add this to my presentation. So you don't need to be part of a learning circle to use this curriculum. You can go through and check out the different modules, and you can take a look. So there is pre-work, and then there is something about their assignment, and then there's more resources. Um, but if you click into the pre-work sections of those modules, that's where you'll find great resources that do a good job of sort of like very brief introductions. They're very bite-sized because that's what we do for best practices. So like for the first week, and this is 7 sessions. The first week is what is open pedagogy. And so that links to, here's an open pedagogy topic page. Here's a video from Rajiv about open pedagogy. You can take a look at what they do in the renewable assignment, and then there's a more resources. And so you can go look in there again for more resources. If you want to do, like, I'm a beginner, I want to do a bit more of a deep dive, I would recommend open pedagogy approaches, particularly for librarians, because it has a lot of great library examples. Instead of just the instructor student dyad relationship, there's also what do I do as a librarian to do this work? How do librarians assist doing open pedagogy? Um, and that can look like a lot of different things. In my case, it looks a lot like I take on an instructional designer role. And so I'm sort of embedded inside of the course and I'm helping that out. Helping them think about like the pedagogy of the assignment they're doing. Where is the scaffolding happening? When are we going to introduce them to Pressbooks, the tool that we use? And we've gotten to the point now where there's like a lot of templating that we have done, but like it took a while to get there. Um, if you're looking for examples of assignments, I would recommend the Open Pedagogy portal as a great starting place. It's got not just case studies and repositories of like the assignments people make, but it also has sort of those digital learning objects that instructional designers and librarians make about open pedagogy, which are really great to use. So for example, my open licensing quiz is one of the resources inside of that portal. And people have at it, like take it, put it in your LMS, use it however you want. Let people pick their licenses. It's That's what it's there for. The reason I recommend that over the Open Pedagogy Notebook is that the Open Pedagogy Notebook is not being maintained anymore. It is just sort of like a time capsule of what happened around that because the Open Pedagogy portal came around and Rajiv and Robin were like, that seems more useful. Let's take this one thing off our plate. But there are great case studies there if you want to read into like in-depth things. If you loved that question bank example, you will find that at the Open Pedagogy Notebook. I should also say Jen has my slides to share out with this recording.
Thank you
So
so much. That's an amazing answer. Thank you very much.
yay.
And I've also shared in the chat the link to the Open Pedagogy portal with from the Open Education Network, and also a link to our Open Pedagogy page, which has a video from the Open Education Network on it on getting started with Open Pedagogy. We are members of the Open Education Network, so if you are interested in taking one of their like certificate programs, they have a certificate in Open Pedagogy or whatever, feel free to come talk to us about that. I am actually on the steering committee now for the Open Education Network. So we're really involved in the work that they do and promoting the work they do because we really believe in their mission. They're such an incredible advocacy group for open education practices, especially in the United States, but we're getting more international with them as well. So if there's anything that when you're looking around on the Open Education Network that you want to know more about, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you with any of that.
Yeah, they have 2 certificate programs. They have this one for open education librarianship, and they also have the open pedagogy one that Jen mentioned.
Yes, Beth is actually in the process of getting certified in the Open Education Librarianship program. She is in the current cohort, um, and we're real excited about that. And I am a graduate of that program, so I've done it as well. Any other questions for Amanda?
I have a question. So, I think from a pedagogical perspective, a faculty member who would like to do uh, open pedagogy activities in their classes, they also need to be prepared for those students who may not want to get involved. What are your suggestions to handle those sorts of conversations, Amanda?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, in my experience, I have not run across a student yet who's been like, I refuse to do this, just to like give positive hope out there. Um, I think there are a couple different things. One is we provide the option that they can always turn their assignments in inside the learning management system. So they're still doing the same assignment, it's just not public and it's being graded through the LMS. Um, that's one way to do it. To make sure there's always sort of like that contained option where they don't have to work in the open. With Pressbooks, we actually have steered them away from doing assignments inside of the learning management system. We just make their pages not public. So they can live in the book, but they're hidden. And they get to, that's one of the decisions that they get to make. If they have pushback about the idea, that's why I suggest that we do a lot of scaffolding around the idea of like, why are we doing this? And what does it look like? And the why part's a really big one. So why did you choose to work in the open? Why are we choosing to work in the open? Why is that important? We can talk about open science. We can talk about open access. We can talk about OER in those spaces. We can talk about like knowledge as a public good, which I know a lot of our institutions have gotten away from that ideal, but like knowledge as a public good, like UNESCO says that knowledge is a human right. And so like we want to make sure that we are grounding, we're willing to share knowledge in order to fulfill that need. Um, and also like at the end of the day, maybe this isn't class for you. Like that's possible. If you really feel that strongly about the content that we're creating and that you're being asked to do, then this might not be the right fit. Let's talk with your advisor to find something that might be. Never have had that come up, but that's one of the options that we talk through with instructors. And a lot of times, if they're hesitant, talking about the why we're doing it and why that matters often helps. And I think also the assurity that they get to decide what happens with their content at the end. So we do get people who are concerned about like, oh, I don't want anyone to look at my writing. No, thank you. No, ma'am. No, sir. I'm not having that. And sometimes they stay in that camp, like it doesn't change for them over the course of the semester. But we also look at that as like a win. They're enforcing their copyright status and they know that they have that now. And so that's fantastic. And the reason why we moved them out of the LMS at Ohio State for closed assignments was just because they're learning the transferable skills of working inside of a WordPress environment. We didn't want them to lose out on the Pressbooks experience because they didn't want their work to be public. Because that's so transferable. They can build websites when they know how WordPress works. They can blog because they know how WordPress works. They can make Pressbooks in the future if they know how Pressbooks work. So we really wanted them to have those skills as well.
Thank you.
And we have Pressbooks for anybody. That's what Syed's main role here. He is our open publishing platform manager, and he can help. We have Pressbooks. Like I said at the beginning of this, we have the hands-on Pressbooks Lunch and Learn tomorrow. But we also support Manifold and LibreText. So if Pressbooks for whatever reason doesn't work for you, we can work with you on those other two platforms. All right, so if there are no more questions, we will wrap it up here. I thank you all for coming today. Like I said, the recording will be available on our playlist within the next week or so. And if you're available, come see us tomorrow at the Pressbooks presentation. And we really appreciate your attendance, and we really appreciate Amanda for her time and her expertise. This is the second time I have invited her somewhere to talk about open pedagogy. I liked it so much the first time that was like one of my first things when we started planning Open Ed Week this year. I was like, I'm going to see if Amanda's available because she is so great. So thank you so much for your time and sharing openly your knowledge about open pedagogy. And thank you all for coming.
Thanks so much for having me.
And have a great afternoon, everybody.